I think generally I'm not one to rise to a challenge. Like, as a kid, I breezed through a lot of my schoolwork, but math was tedious. Math meant sitting at my dining room table with my father to do homework and crying my eyes out because I didn't pick it up immediately like my other subjects, because math was a challenge. So, for the rest of my education, I took the fewest math classes possible, despite doing well in them, simply because I was intimidated by the difficulty. I'm generally the same way when it comes to games. I uninstalled Valorant because I didn't want to train my bad aim. I stopped queuing Overwatch Comp because I felt useless in the face of the DPS passive changes, and I abandoned my Elden Ring playthrough post-Radon because I could not get past the first enemies in the Divine Tower of Liurnia despite trying over and over and over. The struggle I had to go through to overcome these in-game challenges just did not seem worth it, so I gave up on them entirely, and it's only reinforced this belief that I am and will only ever be a casual gamer. That is, until February of this year. I was in a bit of a gaming slump. Overwatch had just released their Season 9 patch notes that eradicated my effectiveness as a support player at my skill level, so I was looking for a new game to grind that didn't make me want to abandon my worldly possessions and move to a hut in the woods. And as luck would have it, I got an invite from my older brother and his friends to play a little game by the name of Ember Knights. Ember Knights is a co-op action roguelite where you play as legendary knights who are fighting to stop a mad sorcerer and his endless hordes of enemies. Now, I've never played a roguelite, at least not to my knowledge. The reason I'm not totally sure is because the roguelite-roguelike genre is massive, with games like this and this both falling into the same category. Generally, though, they have landmark features like procedurally generated levels and permadeath, meaning you're fighting tooth and nail with whatever tools you have at your disposal until you either win or die, losing everything and starting over again from the beginning. In roguelites, this loss is softened by permanent upgrades to your equipment or abilities, but you still have to claw your way back to where you were. This, on paper, sounds a bit daunting to a casual gamer. This sounds like simplifying variable expressions in 6th grade math, but if you get the answer wrong, you get sent back to pre-K. This definition of roguelikes is part of the reason why I hadn't set foot in the genre before, but I figured since Ember Knights is co-op and my brother will probably carry, I might as well try, right? Despite the daunting premise, this game was so much fun. The co-op, the build synergies, the dodge mechanics, the hack and slash gameplay that reawoke the long dormant skills as a button masher I'd trained as a young girl as the only effective strategy against my 2 older siblings when we played Soul Calibur 2, all of it fantastic. I logged 15 hours on this game in the first 3 days and currently have 42 hours played total, which isn't really that much considering I installed it in February and it's now June, but there's good reason for that. While playing Ember Knights on stream one night, my Twitch chat told me that I would also enjoy the roguelite that may have inspired it, which was called Hades. Hades, released 3 years before Ember Knights, is a roguelite dungeon crawler where you play as Zagreus, son of Hades, as he fights his way out of the underworld in an attempt to get to the bottom of a long-standing family mystery. It is now one of my favorite games I've ever played. Much like Ember Knights, it's just fun to hack and slash my way through chambers and put together powerful builds, and what's more is Hades also has an extremely extensive, fully voice-acted narrative that had me antsy to reach the end credits and still yet eager to reach the epilogue afterwards. But most importantly, both games were a challenge for me, but it was a challenge that felt worth rising to. Determining what makes a challenge worth it is a bit difficult though. In general, it's pretty subjective. What made me abandon Valorant, Overwatch, and Elden Ring might have been what kept others around for those games, and what made me drop 100 hours into roguelites might have made someone else drop roguelites entirely. But why is that? What makes the challenge of roguelites different than that of other games? First, it's probably worth looking at the type of gamer I am. I've mentioned before that I've long considered myself a casual gamer, but it may be more apt in the context of this video to refer to myself as a mastery-oriented gamer. Mastery orientation is a term coined by American psychologist Carol Dweck that refers to individuals who make use of positive, self-focusing language and exhibit increased effort in response to failure. To a mastery-oriented person, failure is information that will serve them in solving their problem, not a reflection of their skill or an indicator of future defeat. For example, example, this is the gamer who doesn't deflect blame onto their teammates and sees losses as opportunities to reflect on themselves and learn. This is the opposite of those with a helpless mindset, for whom failure is a wall that blocks their forward progress. Losses demoralize the helpless, decrease their performance, and cause them to employ ineffective strategies. This is the gamer who tilts, who feels like their losses are beyond their control, and who abandons games that they perceive as too challenging. Now, you may be thinking that I should fall under the helpless category, considering the number of in-game challenges I've backed down from. Constantly missing shots in Valorant tilted me to the point of uninstalling. I blamed my fall from Masters to Plat on Overwatch's patch notes, and I dropped Elden Ring altogether because I felt stuck dying to the same enemies. If you had asked me 4 months ago, I would have told you myself that I was helpless. But upon trying roguelites, I've since discovered that I am mastery-oriented when the games I'm playing make effective use of mechanics in order to frame failure in a way that doesn't feel as bad. In Overwatch, once your SR is gone, it's gone. You could maybe get an endorsement from your teammates, but beyond that, there's no consolation prize. You are either the loser or a loser with a level 5 endorse badge. In Elden Ring, losses add pressure. Sure, you return to your last grace rather than the start of the game, but you drop all your runes where you died. If you die on the way back to your runes, they'll be gone forever, and even if you reach your runes, you must win in order to keep them. Losses have gravity, which of course makes the wins all the more gratifying, but it's also much easier to lose all hope if you're struggling to defeat an enemy. In roguelites, a loss means a loss of ground gained. You're sent back to the pool of sticks in Hades or the Nexus in Ember Knights, but though you have lost, you're not without winnings. Both games have 2 forms of currency, that which you can use during your runs and that which you can use outside of your runs. Upon death, you keep the outside currency, which can be used to purchase permanent upgrades to your character in the form of weapons, talents, and more. Because of this, losses don't feel as bad because I've still progressed in a very clear and trackable way, and that sort of tangible reward appeals to and fuels my extrinsic motivation, driving me to play more and more. But people aren't solely intrinsically or extrinsically motivated. Rather, motivation is dependent on the association between ourselves and the task at hand. For example, when I first started playing Hades, I was extrinsically motivated, because although I was bummed about losing, I was still being rewarded with permanent upgrades. Once I received those upgrades, I started winning more often, and grew more intrinsically motivated, not only because winning is personally satisfying, but also because I was able to find my optimal level of challenge. American game designer and play theorist Bernard D. Coven suggested that players don't solely want to win a game, but more so seek a well-played game, one that presents equal opportunities to win or lose and has just the right amount of challenge for everyone involved. Games that are too easily won can feel unengaging and shallow, whereas games that are too hard can feel frustrating and hopeless. So players actually welcome failure when searching for this balance, so long as they're able to win in the end. Similarly, roguelites are designed to work in tandem with this expected failure. Hades and Ember Knights have permanent upgrades available in the form of weapon mods and talents or perks that can be equipped to make your runs easier. Both games also have toggleable conditions to make your runs increasingly more difficult, with options such as larger enemy health pools, variations of boss fights, and much, much more. Mechanics such as these are how roguelites help you find your optimal level of challenge. However, as they do so, they must be mindful to push, yet remain within one's regime of competence. As American researcher in games and learning James Paul G put it when he coined the term, good games adjust challenges and give feedback in such a way that different players feel the game is challenging but doable, and that their effort is paying off. This satisfaction of competence, making players feel capable with optimal challenges within their comfort zones, frees game developers from a reliance on the external influence of rewards, and instead appeals to their audience's innate psychological needs to fuel their self-motivation. We just covered the psychological need for competence in relation to optimal challenge levels, but in order to effectively enhance intrinsic motivation, we must also satisfy the need for autonomy. This need for autonomy can be classified as a desire for choice and opportunities of self-direction. Roguelites fulfill this need through the options that they present to players, which weapon to use, what route and rewards to take, the type of power-ups to obtain, and so on. There's also a need for relatedness, which is a little less crucial to self-motivation in this context, but it makes people more likely to work towards a goal if they feel connected to others doing the same. So I could see how sharing accomplishments and advice in active roguelike communities could encourage someone to step up to the challenge themselves. The satisfaction of these needs, alongside the aforementioned progression markers, tangible feedback and rewards, and an optimized challenge, perfectly set the stage for players to reach what Hungarian-American psychologist Mcmahon describes as the sensation of intense living against the dull background of everyday life. A flow state. A feeling of complete immersion, pure concentration, and a loss of self-consciousness where you lose track of time altogether. It's that moment as you push open the final doors in Hades, setting foot on the snow-covered ground that so starkly contrasts the heat of the underworld, and come face to face with your ultimate foe for the first, 5th, and 50th time to fight yet another battle. I think this is what the kids call locking in. For most, this is a rare occurrence, especially in this day and age where everything is constantly demanding your attention. It's so easy to get distracted by Discord or tempted by TikTok. Just shutting off our brains and living in the moment is hard enough as is, and chasing a fleeting flow state is even more so. Not to mention finding a game whose narrative effectively suspends your disbelief and whose gameplay delivers the perfect mix of struggle and success is like finding a needle in a haystack. And that, along with everything else we've discussed today, is exactly what's been missing from these other games for me, and what only roguelites have been able to deliver so far. A perfect balance of increasing difficulty and releasing tension, of harsh loss and hard-fought victory, and a challenge, but a challenge that was worth rising to. Also, the characters in Hades are fucking hot.